And once again, folks, it is the beautiful, illustrious Joe Jimmy back again for another episode of Black Chat Radio here on the Black Independent Media channel on the Roku Channel Network. Coming at you for the week of March 11th, 2012. Folks, I want to again apologize. Your host has been so busy with so many things, and once again we were unable to produce the show last week, but we are back, and once again we are in your face. Okay, folks, this week's episode, I wanted to talk about what some folks might consider a touchy subject, but of course, once again, here on Black Chat Radio, we're not worried about touchy subjects. We're not worried about controversial subjects. If anything, we want to get these issues out, and we want the public to hear about them, at least to talk about them. And once again, y'all, please share your comments at blackchatradio.blogspot.com. That's blackchatradio.blogspot.com. Don't be shy, folks. It's go ahead and create an account there. Feel free to speak your mind. We want to hear from you, folks. Don't hold back. Don't hide anything. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your voice. But anyway, folks, I wanted to touch on this subject, and of course we'll be discussing this in probably other shows, but I wanted to talk to you about workplace discrimination and the real issues that some of us deal with. Okay, folks, and actually the real solutions that we need to be talking about in regards to workplace discrimination. Okay, folks, number one, let us start off, as we all know, and for those of you who are younger and or who've not done any research into the civil rights movement in this country, to make it really simple, and probably some of you would argue too simple, but I don't care. Prior to 1970, basically, as if you were not white, then it was incredibly difficult for you to do commerce in the United States. When I say do commerce, in a very simple term, I mean to say to make money. Okay? Basically, in nearly every state and city in the United States, you had laws, ordinances, social customs that barred non-white people, specifically blacks. The term is specifically blacks. They use the term Negro or Negro and referring to black folk. But anyway, they had laws and ordinances that specifically targeted blacks. They could not own valuable property. They could not compete with white businesses. Prior to, like I said, the 1970s, blacks, you would often have working the same jobs as their white counterparts and get paid oftentimes a third less than their white coworkers. This actually was the law of the land going back since this country was founded, since the United States was founded, and up into the 1970s, the early 1970s, when it finally there were significant changes for the first time. Anyway, that's a very brief, simplified history in regards to workplace issues and as it relates to our community. Okay, now let's go ahead and fast forward to 2012. Here we are, 2012, not 1970, and we are still dealing with some of the same issues. And once I've said before, your host Joe Jimmy here has said repeatedly that I believe, honestly, that these are issues that black folk will face for time immemorial. I think these are issues that we'll face regardless of how many speeches and marches are held. I think that this country and the people in this country when you talk about, like I said, the was being founded in racial issues, being founded in the laws and the ordinances, what have you, that I discussed earlier, that several hundred years of that you won't get rid of that in a decade of civil rights speeches and marches. No. So anyway, but folks, I wanted to talk about. I wanted, and I would like feedback from some of the audience. Is that some of your experiences in the workplace? What have you dealt with? There's been lawsuits that have been won actually with several corporations. I recall, I believe, one in Alabama where one company, they would consistently have elevated expectations for black and Hispanic workers, specifically black workers. They would, for example, in work evaluations where they give you, they grade you on your ability to complete your job. Blacks would have higher criteria right off the bat, regardless of duties performed. Their criteria, for example, where you'd have a Caucasian worker who basically did, basically just the requirements of the job, nothing else, that he or she would get satisfactory or above satisfactory marks, regardless. And the same black worker who, in fact, would probably go above and beyond his or her duties, not only would they be marked simply as satisfactory, meaning they just did the basic job, they would be marked as being unsatisfactory. Just they would nitpick and they would literally try their best to find something to downgrade that person's evaluation, and thus keeping them away from raises and promotions, etc., within said company. Now, folks, here's the reality. When you talk about business ownership in the United States, blacks own at this point around 1% or a little less than 1% of business ownership in this country. Okay, and that's going back prior to slavery. That number has not changed going back to prior to the 1860s. Blacks own less than 1% of the businesses in this country. And thus, that should tell you that probably upwards of 96, 97% of black folks in the United States have to go outside of the community for a job. Okay, folks, that's hardcore facts. That's no getting away around that. You can break that down further if you like, but there's been several studies. You can go to one of any major publication you want, any professional media outlet that has published figures on the issue. You can go to some of the think tanks and inquire. You can ask for some of the data sheets that they've published. You can, if the simplest thing, if you want, you can actually just get on the internet. But again, with the internet, you want to go to a professional source, of course, to get that information because there've been several over the years. But folks, the reality is that the gross majority of black folks have to seek employment outside of the community, and with that, you go right back to the same issues we talked about earlier with this country's history and its background and its people. Okay. Here's the thing, folks, and here's the reality of it. That and if this angers some of you all, then like I said, folks, I mean, truth. You have to be honest about things, and here at Black Chat Radio, we don't skirt from the truth. We don't hide from it, and we certainly will not shy away when talking about issues like this. But folks, the reality is that the majority of people in the United States, on a certain level, either fear and or despise blacks. And you know, that sounds very controversial in saying that, but folks, I mean, it's based on personal experience. It's based on historical data and interaction. But the majority of folks in this country either fear or despise blacks, either one or both, on some level. There's a contempt that has always been there for blacks and black culture. They like black, they like black music. They like black athletes and black entertainers and whatnot. But that's where it pretty much ends. They like the music. They like the entertainers. And once you get past that, it's over. Okay, the interaction becomes very hostile and has always been as such, like I said, since the beginning. And with that, folks, when the topic of the show, workplace discrimination, and I mentioned the one great example of the lawsuit that was filed, and actually was the Department of Justice is actually it sued, the EEOC sued on these people's behalf, these black workers or what have you. I believe is in Alabama, but folks, I don't have the specifics of that case. I should make available, but anyway, folks, that was one example of redress that is so very difficult to come by in this country. But anyway, folks, I mean, I could talk about that for hours on end. I mean, we could really, and like I said, this is not a topic that we will it won't be a one-shot deal. We'll discuss it on other shows, because I know this is something that a lot of people in our community deal with. And that just goes back to the number I gave you. Like as I stated before, blacks own less than 1% of the businesses in this country. So naturally, I am confident that many in our listening base, those of you who are from the African American community, are familiar with this. Okay. Now, having talked about that, we need to talk about what I consider real solutions to this problem, because, folks, I think black folk can march and have speeches until they are blue in the face, and they can march for 20 miles a day, and this will not change, folks. And this is something that requires real solutions beyond rhetoric and speeches and marches and sit-ins, this kind of stuff like that. Because I mean, the bottom line is that you having to go through people who despise you for income. Okay, and between you and me, your host Joe Jimmy, I think that's a very mean and harsh existence. I mean, you literally have to go through you literally have to go through your enemy for sustenance. I mean, I think that is just, I can't even imagine, I call that tyranny, as how I define that. I mean, you can call it what you want to. You can say, oh, well, it's just suffering. It's part of, it should be part of, the normal expectation for black folks, which I wholly reject. I call that tyranny, folks. I mean, I don't think there's a more simpler definition of it. I mean, you literally having to it's the equivalent of Jews having to go through, let's say, Nazis or Germans for basically the ability to eke out a living, or Jews having to go through Arabs. Not so much Arabs, I apologize for that. No, or Jews having to go through Al Qaeda for a job. This is essentially what blacks go through in the United States. That they, it's a very, it's the exact equivalent. Basically, you having to go through people who despise you, who loathe you, who seek to destroy you because you are not one of them. That's tyranny, folks. That is tyranny, plain and simple. I don't care how you want to rephrase it, you want to color code it, but bottom line, that's exactly what it is. And the solution, the real solution to that, folks, not the speeches, not the songs, singing the church songs and singing the religious songs and holding hands and all this kind of stuff. Folks, we need to go ahead and push, and yes, I will say it, the R word, reparations. Because, folks, recently in this whole economic downturn we've had since in 2008, you've all seen the numbers on CNN where they had black unemployment is almost is rising. It's almost 20% now. And folks, let me tell you that right now, that government figure of 20%, or was it 18% for blacks, is grossly underrepresented. We all know that. I would say to you, folks, and understand this: when they release unemployment figures, those are for people who've actually called in and applied for unemployment benefits. Okay, meaning that some government entity, unemployment. When somebody has called in and told the government that, okay, I'm unemployed and I want benefits. Okay, and there they ask for your race, your name, address, race, and all that stuff. But those numbers that the government they give out, those are people who've actually called in and told that, hey, I need unemployment assistance. Okay, now that does not include people who for example, let's say people who never were eligible for unemployment, people who have been released from unemployment, their benefits have ran out. That does not include that demographic. Okay, so I think those numbers, 18%, more accurately, I think the unemployment rate for blacks is likely around 40%. 40%, I think that's a much more accurate number as far as black unemployment is concerned. Okay, that out of the way, folks. The real issue here is that, when I say reparations, and people want to moan and groan and sigh because blacks have been asking for reparations right after slavery, 1860s. They were refused and ignored then. And, I think it's still of course it's valid, because you're dealing with the same after effects, the exclusion, the laws, the ordinances, the social customs. I mean, you have all of that comes in, all that comes into play in what you see today. And it comes into play in all your interactions in society, folks. You will have, there is no present without the past. There will be no future without the present. Okay, so for those of you who want to create this disconnect, you want to say, you need to move on and forget about the past. You need to move on. It happened a long time ago. Folks, like I said, black folks owned less than 1% of businesses back in 1865 at the end of slavery. And here in 2012, blacks still own less than 1% of businesses in the United States as of 2012. So, those numbers haven't changed. Okay, I mean, you can say what you want to, but I mean, they have not changed. And you can look at a number of factors that surround that, but the reality is that has not changed, and you can try to paint that picture as you want to, but that's it's facts and immutable facts that we can't get away from. But folks, the real fix to this is, the bottom line is that for several hundred years, white society used government not only to enslave blacks. White society used government, and I say white society, I know this is a very multicultural society we live in. Of course we do. Yes, absolutely. But I say white society from a historical context. This is what blacks in the United States have been having. The number one entity that has fought against their progress, or our progress rather. But for several folks, since this country was founded, and prior to its official founding in 1776, White society has used government to enslave blacks. It used government to keep blacks under Jim Crow segregation up into the late 1960s, early 1970s. So don't think slavery and after slavery it was over with. No, I mean you had Jim Crow, what's called Jim Crow laws that basically consigned blacks to third class status up into the late 1960s and early 1970s, as I stated earlier. So folks, from 1776 up into the early 1970s, blacks, white society has used government to shut blacks out of commerce, to shut them out of property ownership, to shut them out of equal protection, to shut them out of trade. I mean, folks, like I said, I don't want to drag this conversation out for too long because we'll go back to this topic in future shows. But basically, you have from 1776 up into 2012, or rather, I'm sorry, not 2012, the early 1970s. You have laws, thousands of ordinances, social customs. For example, law enforcement would often be the primary entity that would, in fact, vandalize black property, burn down houses, burn down churches. Law enforcement either would be a principal party to it, or enable and empower terrorist organizations to destroy black property and take black lives. Law enforcement, as we know, is through the government, either local governments, state governments, the National Guard, etc. These were tools that were used to control blacks, to tyrannize blacks, to destroy their property, to take whatever land, certainly valuable real estate land they owned. That white society, so white society has used government and government entities to keep black in a certain place and a certain economic realm, that being poverty, consistent, immovable poverty, unbreakable. There was no escape from the circumstances. I mean, just like I said, up into the civil rights movement, and when the laws were actually changed in the early 1970s. You had no option. It's something you had to live with if you accepted that. Okay, so white society has used government as a tool to advantage themselves at the expense of blacks and other groups. You could also argue, for American Indians, of course, that's a whole different topic that and I'm certainly not to diminish what American Indians, Native American Indians had to go through. I won't talk about that. But again, there's some things to that too that probably, like I said, I'm opening a can of worms here. I know that. But I mean, just to keep on topic, folks, I think blacks, when they talk about government, you see all these people talking about, big government this and big government that. We saw back in 2008, 2009, where once again, white society used big government to get several $1 billion of bailout money. 700, 800, almost $1 trillion of government welfare. And that's exactly what the whole bailout thing was back for the economic crisis that ran the bailout. It was government welfare to probably 96% white-owned businesses given to them to jumpstart their economies, to jumpstart their businesses or what have you. And like I said, this money, this is probably the greatest example of white society once again using government to benefit and enrich themselves. Okay, and folks, now when you talk about on the flip side of that coin, black folk trying to use government to benefit themselves and to uplift their communities or whatnot, you have a huge backlash. You immediately, folks, if there's even any kind of synonymous discussion of blacks and government, you get a huge backlash. Oh, government waste. Oh, it's so wasteful. Oh, these people are just, they want to use the government. Big government this, big government that. Oh, big government is such a terrible, terrible thing. But I heard none of this. I heard none of this when it benefited white society and white businesses with that initial $700 billion bailout. Of course, we all know that's ballooned to several $1 trillion now. But none of this anti-government fervor was heard when that money, those $1 billion settlements were given to white-owned businesses, okay, or rather non-black businesses. Okay, none of this was heard. I didn't hear not one commentator talk about the evils of big government and the evils of government tyranny when it came to whites getting money from government welfare. Okay, but blacks, on the other hand, receiving at the very least food stamps. Even that is immediately just it's just so wasteful, and it's so pointless. But it's not wasteful to give out essentially over $1 trillion to white-owned businesses. That's not wasteful. No, that's not wasteful at all. But it's extremely wasteful when anything, even food stamps, goes to blacks. Okay, folks, I don't know about you, but I mean, This argument is not very difficult at all. It's actually quite simple. And I say, not only is it blacks owed reparations just because of the when you talk about, like I said, keep it. Don't get into emotional arguments here, folks. Don't get into emotionalism and hearsay, conjecture, innuendo, rumors. Go ahead and get facts and information, okay? Look up how many laws. Folks, I want to challenge the listeners right now, okay? I want to challenge each and every one of you. Research. Go to your local law schools. Go to your local governments, your local city, state governments. Usually they keep historical documents, and you can actually see those laws. How many laws, for example, in the state of, let's say, Alabama, how many laws, ordinances, etc., in the state of Alabama, all those different cities, how many laws specifically mention the term Negro, colored, and or black? Okay, and what laws shut blacks out of ownership, barred them from this, barred them from that, shut them out of this? They basically, tabulate how many of those laws and get a real brief explanation of each one of them. Okay, and share the results of your research on our webpage. That's blackchatradio.blogspot.com. I'll repeat, that's blackchatradio.blogspot.com. Folks, I'm asking you all to educate yourselves on this issue, because a lot of people are really misinformed, and we have to keep it to the facts. Let's keep it to the facts. Keep it to information, keep it to figures and facts that can be cross-checked and verified. Please go to your local law schools, your local government, city, state. All this information is kept. Okay, you keep that real simple. Do not get into shouting. I've seen people, they get in these shouting matches. They start yelling at the top of their lungs. Folks, this only makes, don't. Let's keep it intelligent and keep it strictly based on information, okay? The real solution, again, just to keep us on topic and summarize, is black folk need to use government as a tool to uplift themselves. Right now, we're facing, like I said, nearly 40% unemployment. We see cities like Detroit, Michigan. Folks, for all intents and purposes, Detroit, Michigan, which is a majority black city, is nearly third world. The poverty rates, the unemployment rates are astronomical. They are unheard of, and it goes all back to people not having access to capital, et cetera, just from a historical sense and from a modern sense, because as we said, it's particularly in economics. Economics is a study of monetary policies over time. Not the past 30 years, not the past 40 years, over time. The United States did not start in 40 years. Certainly with this huge economy, was not created in 40 years. after the civil rights movement. That's ridiculous and absurd. It took several hundred years, and several hundred years, mind you, of tyranny and exclusion, at the benefit of white society and to the disadvantage of and marginalization of blacks. And like I said, folks, that sounds controversial. I'm sure some of you listening, this whole discussion may have angered you, possibly. I don't know. But folks, I mean, like I said, keep it to facts and information. Don't get caught up in the emotionalism. Okay. But anyway, folks, we want to hear from you, folks. Again, do that research in whatever city you live in. If it takes you a weekend, just go ahead and research how many laws, ordinances, etc. in your local city or your state. You can go to keep it to the city, I guess, to keep it to where it doesn't get so massive. But how many laws targeted colored, Negro, black? What were the effects of those laws and those ordinances? What long-term effects, what short-term effects they had. Gather that information and let us know about it. Again, feel free to leave your comments at blackchatradio.blogspot.com. We want to hear from you folks. Okay. So again, guys, here at Black Chat Radio, we don't shy away from controversy. We don't shy away from what people don't want to talk about. If anything, Joe Jimmy, your host here, feel that we have a duty to discuss these issues, because if we don't discuss them, I mean, this is one of the great tragedies of our time. Because, like I said, that unemployment rate that we have for Black Americans at 40%, I think will spell to complete disaster. I think it'll be. I don't know, folks. I mean, I think this is what happened to Jews prior to the Holocaust, where you had in Germany, they were slowly, but their status was eroding, and it eroded and eroded and eroded, and before you knew it, the Nazi regime began, and you just had open violence against Jews. Folks, I think we may be getting there here in the United States. Who knows? But here at Black Chat Radio, we will certainly discuss it and talk about it. We certainly won't shy away from it. And we will make sure that you, at the very least, listening audience, is informed on some level. So anyway, folks, I am your host, Joe Jimmy. This is the conclusion. We will conclude the show now on Black Chat Radio. Please tell a friend about us. Tell everybody you know. Feel free to leave your comments. blackchatradio.blogspot.com. We want to hear from you, folks. I mean, don't feel shy. You can leave comments. You can leave anonymous comments. Of course, they will be filtered. And but anyway, we want to hear from you, folks. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your commentary. Don't shy away from anything. Okay. So anyway, folks, we will see you again in a week. And we thank you for tuning in. And have a good evening.